Hello and welcome here on startup.ro. My name is Ved Andriescu, the editor-in-chief of startup.ro, and today we're going to talk about how to take your startup from Romania or from the region and go to the US, have a US entity there in order to talk better with the investors to find new opportunities. And with me today is Tytus Cytowski, which helps startups do this. He is a lawyer specialized in this area, investments, flipping the company to the US. Tytus, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. So before going into details into our topic of conversation today, tell us a bit about your activity, your focus as a lawyer.
Right. So we offer three products: U.S. market expansion, support for technology companies, start, scale, and exit. And then we do VC financing. We've done over $3.5 billion dollars in VC financing for both the company side and the VC side. I have Central and Eastern European roots. I'm originally Polish, but I've lived in America most of my life. And I've discovered that I have an amazing founder market fit and a product market fit for founders from Central and Eastern Europe that are heading to the Bay Area to start, fundraise, and scale, and sometimes also exit.
So because our topic of conversation today is this thing, flipping the company to the US, basically taking a company from Romania, Poland, Hungary, and making a US entity.
Right.
Dumbing it down for those who don't know, what does it mean, basically?
Right. So flipping doesn't mean that you're not a Romanian patriot and you don't want to
Yeah.
have a company in Romania. It means in plain English, making sure and bulletproofing your company for success. Most investors from the US will not invest in a Romanian company directly. They will only invest in a US based company. So what we call flipping is another way of saying we're reincorporating the company in the US. So we're moving the ownership structure to the US, to the state of Delaware. It doesn't mean that we're moving the IP, we're just moving the ownership of the shareholders, the VCs and the founders to the US. So it can take many shapes or forms. There's no magic formula and cheat sheet for a flip. It's on a case-by-case basis. You cannot do this through Atlas, Stripe, or Clerky. Many people are tempted to do it yourself, but this is a moment where you need to have a lawyer help you. And I understand entrepreneurs are mostly chief everything officers and they appoint themselves also as lawyers. But in general, there's no roadmap for this process. And each company is unique and you have to look at several factors to determine how to do it.
You mentioned, and I'm happy that you mentioned some services, some do-it-yourself services that have been promoted in the last few years. And why is so complicated and what's risky in doing it yourself as an entrepreneur?
Right. So one of the big risks is the tax in your home country. So there are different tax regimes, and a company at the pre-seed stage, seed stage, Series A stage is different, and there's different taxes, I would say. Sometimes you can do it with convertible notes. So you need to know how to move those convertible notes to the US entity. Sometimes you need to flip the shares. Sometimes there's debt involved. So it's not that easy. And you need to, really think hard to make sure that it's done in a not only a legal correct way, but also a tax correct way. And as we know, tax law in Romania and Central and Eastern Europe changes like the weather.
Yep, indeed. You helped some Romanian companies, and I will mention Veridian Sessions, for example, in doing this process.
And Digital.
Digital, of course, yeah. So you mentioned that the fact that some investors in the US don't invest in companies that are based entirely in Central Europe. They should be based in the US. Why is this the case?
So they're not familiar with the law.
Mm.
They don't have time to educate themselves. Number two, there are tax advantages for US investors that invest directly into a US tax company, and that in plain English, that tax advantage means they don't pay any capital gains on the exit. So that's very advantageous. And number three, I think, which is very practical, there is such a competition in the Bay Area for attention of VCs that they don't need to build in legal, political risk into the model. So I would say 90% of the companies that are foreign started, but they incorporate in Delaware or they flip to Delaware so they can be investable. And it doesn't mean that the legal system in Europe is inferior or it's not good or there are no good tax incentives. It just means that the largest pool of sophisticated investors only want to invest in a Delaware company because it's predictable.
Yeah. How does this process differ if we're talking about a startup that is in the pre-seed round, looks to raise a seed round, haven't had any investments before here in the region, and the startup that is already invested in and looks to flip in the US?
Yeah, so I would say if it's only three founders, with an MVP, no investment, no convertible note from like a Gapminder or Underline or anybody like that, it's pretty simple. There's probably net operating losses, which you can show to the Romanian tax authority saying that the company is negative in the red and there's no tax obligation if the founders do the flip. So basically, it's super easy. It's 2 to 3 weeks. The cost is, I would say, manageable. There's enough net operating losses in the company to show negative or low valuation. And this can be achieved through a share exchange or some sort of sale of the shares from Romania to the US company, and in exchange, the founders get US shares. And you can't do this through Atlas, Stripe, or Clerky, and they're wonderful services for bootstrapping founders, and I recommend them. But to do the flip, they don't sync well with Romanian law or laws from Central and Eastern Europe. You kind of, if you start off directly with a US company through Clerky or Atlas Stripe, then that works.
Well, regarding this, what would you advise founders? Because sometimes they think that, okay, I'm gonna start the company, base my company in the US directly. They think it's good for the business. They think it's good for PR. You have on the website an US address. Yeah. But is it a good way of going?
I would say it's a very good way of going. It's an experiment. Closing down the company is really easy. Starting it is easy, closing it down is easy. So if you fail, you fail. And what I recommend is, you have to be yourself and you have to have your Romanian DNA, but at the same time, you need to kind of window dress yourself for your US customers. And US customers, for example, they want to pay with checks. You can't processing checks through a Romanian bank or TransferWise or Revolut is kind of difficult. It's a lot easier if you have a US bank
Yeah.
account or a US company. So that's one component. Then the second component is if you want to attract talent, the employee stock option plan is a lot easier. It's pretty standardized and you can create it through Clerky, for example. And then, fundraising is super easy. So for example, let's say you go to the Bay Area, you show up on a parachute, you have great meetings, people are excited, and you get an angel investor who wants to invest $50,000 into your company. And for a pre-seed company, that's like a lot. And it can move the needle a lot in Bucharest. In the US and Delaware, you can sign a SAFE, and it's quite easy. If you take the money into a company in Bucharest, you would need to have a notarization, apostille, just to get the ball rolling. So it just causes a bit of friction for the investor. And again, when you're competing for attention
Yeah.
with other founders, you don't want to create unnecessary friction.
Yeah, indeed. It's how fast can you build the product, but also how fast can you move in this relationship with investors. But how involved should be the founders or the founder, the CEO, in this process of flipping? And I'm thinking because some may be scared. It's going to be a complicated process. You said 2-3 weeks, but I have to be involved and forget about the product.
Right.
How should they approach you, and how do you work with them?
So, look, founders should focus on things that they do best, which is, building products and making their customers happy. My job as a lawyer is to make my customers happy. So they don't need a PhD in law and flipping. They need to focus on some, basic things. What we do is we provide them with a roadmap. We coordinate with local Romanian council to get the project moving. And there's some commercial questions that we need to discuss, but that can be done quite easily. But I want to focus just, one thing
Yeah.
on a couple of bottlenecks in the flip
Yeah.
area. One is Americanizing the company and how far you can go. Then problems with the cap table. And the cap table is kind of always problematic. And how do you convert certain things, euros to USDs, percentages, employee stock option plan, all of those things make it kind of difficult. And then the Americanization component, I would say, is, there's certain deal terms that are specific for Europe and Romania, which are not tailored for the US market. So many times, we have to we have a Dacia or we have a Renault and we have to convert that to a Ford Mustang. And I would say that's where things get kind of complicated, where there's an investor and we either keep those things, and we have this what I call the Transylvanian Frankenstein flip company, or we have the all-American girl who's fully Americanized and she looks great and wins competitions.
What are some of these deal terms that you can find in term sheets and papers in Romania that don't work so much with that American girl you mentioned?
Right. So for example, I would say the ROFR sometimes does not work. So the ROFR on all of the shares. So usually in the US, only the investors have the ROFR. Another example is co-sale rights. Founders will never have the financial means to exercise their co-sale rights if they have them. Another one is how the drag works. Another problematic area is the board of directors. So in Europe, I don't remember if in Romania you have this, there's the supervisory board. So in Germany, we have the supervisory board, and it has different responsibilities, and it's not in the US. Then another, I would say, governance issue that deals with Americanization is veto rights, how extensive they are. It's, quite well known that European VCs love to maximize control, and they're obsessed about it, while investors in the US want to maximize wealth. So sometimes we have to dilute those rights. And sometimes, a certain investor has an affirmative veto right and he has to give it up. They're not that keen on giving that up. So it's things like this. And it causes, basically, when we're flipping, we want to avoid renegotiation of the financing documents that were accepted. And a lot of times, there's a renegotiation because there's a new term sheet and from a US investor who wants to make this beautiful Romanian girl or boy more American.
And in terms of, because you mentioned at the beginning, in terms of IP, usually the company keep the IP in their Romanian entity, they go with the IP in the US company.
Yeah. So what happens is always the IP stays in Romania.
Okay.
So it's always IP stays in Romania, because if we move the IP, the Romanian entity has income tax to pay on the sale, and we don't want to do that. What we want to do is after the flip, we would want to license the IP to the US company, and the US company pays the Romanian company a licensing fee for that IP, and that license is exclusive, non-revocable, so it stays with the US company. And this way we can pay the software engineers every quarter month for 12 months. And also, Romania is happy because the IP stays in Romania. It's generated an IP in Romanian and has, the made in Bucharest stamp, which makes everyone proud.
Find the downside to flipping from your experience. Something founders maybe don't think about.
Yeah. So, based on my experience with a couple of Romanian founders, I am not going to name them. They think there's like a playbook, and it should be, priced super low, and it's never, everyone wants to, save money. They don't want to pay the lawyer. I get it. But it is kind of complicated. And from my experience, Romanian flips are always complicated because there's always some sort of complication. And I'll give you an example. In Romania, for tax reasons, a lot of founders have founder SPV vehicles, right? So they don't have to pay, or they can optimize their income tax, right? And in the US, founders hold shares directly because they have preferential tax treatment. So there's always an issue. Do we remove these founder vehicles? Do we keep them? Is the founder planning to move to the US? And it takes a lot of convincing and back and forth between US counsel and the Romanian founder about, do we keep this as founder SPV vehicle?
And
I would say the younger founders don't have these SP vehicles. founders who started in the late 90s and have this 90s entrepreneur mindset of, Romania, things are all in flux and things are crazy. They have these SPV vehicles.
And how should you communicate inside the startup as a founder? Because as you mentioned, you have to change some things. You have to change some things in the cap table. You have to talk to the current investors. Do you advise them on basically talking to the investors, to everybody before starting this process in order to have their green flag basically on doing this?
Yeah, so I would say talk to your investors about things that need to be Americanized before. You do not want to get the term sheet from your investor who's going to lead the round, and then you have a huge fight between your Romanian VCs and your new investors about deal terms. So it should be, you should have an Excel spreadsheet saying, okay, this is what we have, this is what we're proposing, this is market, and at least have a comparison of what should be Americanized and what should be left as is. And sometimes, things are left as is to have this conversation down the road.
Is this, out of curiosity, is this there any geography in Europe that does not need this flipping treatment? Or it doesn't matter if you're from Germany, France, you have a company in the UK, in Romania, in Poland. For
So
the
I would
US market is the same.
big context, if you have customers in Europe, you don't need to flip. If you have customers in the US, you most likely will need to flip. If your investors are from the US, most likely you will have to flip. If your acquirer down the road will be from the US, you most likely need to flip. Countries that don't are, I would say, super sexy for US VCs are Estonia, UK, sometimes Germany, but Germany only if the company is just exploding and is growing high. And why Estonia and why UK? UK law is very similar to the US. It's common law, and Estonian law has been pretty much Americanized, so it's very much similar, and the flip process is easy. And I think there's a quote from Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, who says there's nothing that gets Silicon Valley investors more excited than an Estonian founder. So Estonia, UK are let's say, the geographies that I've seen in US investors invest directly.
And because we don't have much time, I wanted to ask if you work usually with the funds, because you mentioned Gapminder underline, or directly with the founders. I mean,
yeah. So I would say it's a pretty small, CE in general is a pretty small market.
Yeah.
I work both with, the fund side. I've worked with Dan Lupu from Early Bird. I've worked with Credo Ventures, Andre Bartosz, who invested in UiPath. I've worked with Day One. I've worked with Bogdan from Underline. So a full spectrum. And I've worked with, Digital, Viridian, FlowX. I've worked with Vasily from Good Legal. So it's all over. And because it's such an underserved market, I've also worked with funds and founders at the same time to help them out. And, I'm also an angel investor, and my role is not only to help with the legal, but also help and give back to the ecosystem and support the best founders out there as an angel investor.
Tytus,
So have a holistic
yeah.
approach, say.
Tytus, thank you very much for the conversation and for the details, and hope you will be involved in more and more transactions for Romanian founders and funds.
I love Romania, and as a Polish person, I have a big appreciation for Romanians. My family lived on the Romanian-Polish border in 1939, so they spoke fluent Romanian and Polish and Ukrainian. So I feel connected, and I'm planning to be in Bucharest for How to Web in October. So looking forward to having a sip of rakia and enjoying times.
Looking forward to it. Tytus, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us at this conversation about how to flip your company to the US, basically how to maximize the opportunities. And as always, after this conversation, do not be cheap. Pay your lawyer because it's going to be a good thing for your company. Thank you very much.